Hi guys, you're tuning into Jae2alk, a faith-based podcast featuring Jesus and Janae. I'm your host Janae, and here I talk about my life and how Jesus has and is currently helping me through it. One important thing, here we listen and we do not judge, but if you choose to judge, that is between you and the big God. So, this is my first episode, and I am both very excited and actually very nervous. I've been planning this podcast for about a year and a half, and I am finally putting it into reality. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear a little bit about me and why I decided to make a podcast. So before I get into anything, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about me and who I am. So my name is Janae. I am 24 years old and I am from Connecticut. I went to the University of Connecticut and I majored in psychology. A little bit about the background of schooling and stuff. So obviously when you're a kid, you have goals and aspirations. So when I was a really little girl, I wanted to be a gymnast. And then growing up, I wanted to be an actress around middle school, I think. Elementary school, middle school. And then when I got to high school, I knew that my purpose was to help people, but I just didn't know at what capacity, or I didn't know at what extent. So I would say that when I was a senior in high school, I took psychology for the first time and I really enjoyed it. But I wanted to be a sexologist. Why? I have no idea. If I could really tell you, I have no clue why I wanted to be a sexologist. But a sexologist, if you don't know, is someone who studies sex, but the whole, all components of sex. So gender, sex as an intimacy, sexual orientation, all components of sex. And I don't know why I wanted to be that. But going into freshman year of college, I was undecided. And then maybe a month or two into my freshman year, I majored in psychology. I took a few psychology courses, and general psychology, you kind of get a little more knowledge on terms in psychology. So I heard about all the different terms of psychology, and I was interested in abstract psychology, which includes mental health. So I decided maybe either freshman or sophomore year of college that I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, which is someone who focuses on not only mental health issues, but also different psychological disorders. I was really interested in that. So after college, I wanted to work with children. So I started to work at a residential center or residential housing institution, whatever, for children with mental health issues, psychological disorders, and behavioral issues, all in one house, crazy. But I loved those kiddos. I loved the job for what it was. It came with a lot of stress, I'm not gonna lie. So I think I'm gonna get more into that. But yeah, I worked there, and eventually I worked at a children's hospital with kids with the same thing, but it was more mental health and less behavioral where I worked in the hospital. I also did work with children with behavioral issues, but just less of that because I wasn't in the ED. Sometimes I was, but I was mainly on the floors, which is eating disorders, psychosis, or eating disorders, psychosis, suicidal ideation. So yeah. Okay, so I am going to be doing a game. It is a card game, and I am going to do this at the beginning of every single episode. The game is called Let's Get Deep. It's a couples game, but the card questions are kind of intimate, so you can get to know the person on a deeper level. So there's 3 different types of cards. There's an icebreaker card, there's a deep card, and there's a deeper card. I'm going to read one of each so that you guys can every episode get a little bit of more information about me, who I am, and how I think. So I'm going to be choosing 3 random cards. I have the cards in bags, not the box, because I don't know where the box is. So I'm going to choose one of each. The icebreaker card reads, what's the most unusual place you've fallen asleep? If I can be honest, I have not fallen asleep anywhere unusual, but that's because I have to be aware of my surroundings. So if I'm ever out in public, I will never fall asleep. But I can fall asleep. If one thing about me is I can fall asleep anywhere at any time. I know that kind of contradicts itself, but like I could do it if I wanted to do it, but I don't do it because I need to be aware of my surroundings. But the most unusual place I've fallen asleep, nowhere unusual. I would say like school, but that's not unusual. Movie theater, that's not unusual. My car, that's not really unusual either. Like, I don't know. I don't fall asleep in unusual places, if that makes sense. The deep card says, name one unsolicited act of kindness you recently provided. I would say that maybe about a month ago, I was driving and I had got pizza. So I was driving home. I seen a homeless guy who I give money to quite often. I seen him sitting outside the store, and honestly, I drove past him, and I was literally like maybe 30 seconds away from the store, and God put it on my heart to go back. So I went back, and a little bit about that time, I was trying to store my money well, so I was going to save I was going to eat half the pizza that day and half the pizza the next day. It was 8 slices, so 4 each day. But God told me to go back. So I went back. I gave him the pizza. I gave him 2 or 3 slices. I don't remember. And I said, God loves you. God bless you. And I drove away. He was really, really happy. And obviously, I don't think I had like money, but I know that I ate the next day. So yeah, God will always bless you if you bless his people. But I don't do it I do things to be obedient. And I'm honestly just like such a giver. Like I give, you know how God is like, people are like, oh, if God blesses you, he wants to know that you're going to like storage your blessings well and that you're going to give. Like he doesn't just give so that you can have, he gives so other people can have. My problem is not that I don't give. My problem is that I give. Like I will give my last, and sometimes your blessings are just for you, but like me, like I'm so quick to give. And God is really working on me on that, because sometimes I give when he doesn't put on my heart to give. And that's another topic for another day. But yeah, the deeper card says, if you had a memoir, what would it be called? If I had a memoir, it would probably be called Let's Talk About Nay. Let's Talk About Nay. Yeah, that's nice. Nene, that's my childhood nickname. The people who call me that still are my dad, my older sister, and my little brother. They call me Nene, but nobody else does. A few people like in school would call me that, but yeah, I would say let's talk about Nene. That's cute. Okay, so now for my favorite segment of the day. We have quote of the day on the way. That was cute, right? All right, so quote of the day, a little bit about quote of the day. I used to do quote of the day in high school. I used to post a quote every single morning on Snapchat, and it would just be a random quote that I would look up, inspirational quotes, and I would post it every single morning, and people loved it. And when I stopped doing it, a handful of people actually, this is when Snapchat was like, I know that people still use Snapchat. I don't use Snapchat. But like when I see people using it, I'm like, should I get back on Snapchat? Like, but probably not. Regardless. So when I stopped, people would message me and they would be like, well, why did you stop? And I'm just like, oh, people like this. But when I was planning for my podcast, God put it on my heart that I should do quote of the day on my podcast. So I actually practiced doing quote of the day on TikTok, which I might talk about a little bit later, but yeah, in this version of quote of the day, though, I'm going to give a quote from a human and a Bible verse that intertwine, and I'm going to give a takeaway message. So, with that being said, for quote of the day, I have a quote and a Bible verse, and the quote reads, by the way, I have my iPad as my cue card because I do not have cue cards yet. But I do plan on getting cue cards because I just feel like that's like more professional. So, but yeah, I have my iPad, which is like so cute. It's pink. But the quote reads, life doesn't happen to you. It happens for you. And the Bible verse reads, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. That is Romans 8:2-8. The quote is by Jim Carrey. And my takeaway message is that planning for this podcast, I started to plan for this podcast March of 2023. That's when I got the idea to start a podcast. And I will talk about that a little bit later. But since then, like, it's just been like so hard. And in August, I quit my job. I quit the hospital job, and I was so confident that I was moving in August. So I went to Dallas and Houston in August because I was told that I was moving to Texas. So I visited both places and I liked it. I seen a lot of things about God, and my friend told me that it was I don't remember what he called it, but it had to do with like a God state, but it wasn't called God state. But there were so many churches, so many billboards about God, and they have like maybe like I've only seen like 2 billboards about like Jesus or God in Connecticut, but like they were like everywhere, and everyone has them on their trucks, and like it's just like I don't know, I just really loved it. And I was just really confident that I was moving in August. I felt like I heard God say August, and I quit my job. But I quit my job because God told me to, before I even like was confident that I was moving. But I ended up applying to a place where I feel like God told me I was going to be moving. And I'm so confident that that's the place he told me I was going to be moving. It just wasn't the time. I ended up getting denied. And that made my faith like dwindle down 0 to none, really. They say you have to have faith the size of a mustard seed, and my mustard seed was not a seed. It was like mustard. Like it was like literally nothing. So that really like took me out, really. But since then, like in August all the way up to November, I was facing so much warfare. The devil was like doing a number on me, but I realized that the devil can't do anything that God doesn't allow him to do. And I realized now why God was doing it. John 13:7 says, "What I am doing now you do not understand, but you will understand later." I see now that life wasn't happening to me, it was happening for me. And he was like, at the time where I didn't have a job, I felt so depressed, and I was crying out to him, and I was telling him like, God, like I don't have a job. I feel like I'm stuck here. So much stuff was happening to my car. That's how the devil was getting me. And at the time, like I wasn't smoking. That's one of my like things that I've overcome. I don't smoke anymore, but at the time I wasn't smoking. Like I had quit, but it was like him attacking my car was a way to get inside, and I did fall back into that sin. And like I just remember like crying out to God, like I really don't want to do this anymore. You already delivered me from this. Like, and I was like so stressed, and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna smoke, so I'm gonna have a drink. And it's just like I was just so like, you know, like I was so hurt because I felt like I was moving in faith, and it was like, God, I'm doing what I feel like I'm doing what you're asking me to do. I feel like you told me something, and I'm trying to show you that I have faith. And it just felt like the world was just like against me, and like God was just allowing all this stuff to happen to me, even though I felt like I was being faithful. And I was really, really sad. And I didn't have any money because I didn't have a job. And I was still making videos. Like that's when God told me like to do quote of the day. So I was showing up every single day, and I was doing quote of the day every day or almost every day. And I even said it in some of my quote of the days, like, I do not feel like doing this, but I'm still going to do it because I'm trying to be obedient. And I feel like me showing God that I was being obedient was him like building my discipline, because he did put Jae2alk on my mind. But he's like, you're not going to do Jae2alk and then like say, oh, well, I don't want to record today. Like, I feel like he wasn't going to give me this if I wasn't going to be consistent in it. So I feel like he was building my discipline, and he was also building up my strength and allowing me to have faith in him. And then come November, I couldn't get a job. I was applying to jobs I was overly qualified for, mind you, and I didn't get accepted into them. But he did allow me to work at Amazon. And I know that it was him who was allowing me to work at Amazon, because when I tried to apply to Amazon myself, there was nothing available. Then I go up to my brother's room, smoking, by the way. And it was me, my brother, and his friend, and we were sitting there, and my brother's like, oh, there's spots available. Mind you, I had just checked that day and there was none. But when I went upstairs, there was. And me and the friend applied because my brother was already working there. Me and the friend applied and we had an appointment. I went. Mind you, he was also trying to work on my humility because Amazon was the one place that I did not want to work. I vowed to myself that I would never work there, and I just felt so ashamed to work there. And I know that there's so many people who work there, and this is no shade to you if you work at Amazon, because eventually it didn't seem so bad to me. And I didn't want to give it up because I'm like, this is the only money that I'm receiving and I need money. So when I get to Amazon, I'm in such bad spirits every day. My feet are hurting at first. My back's hurting. I'm over it. But I'm like, I need the money. I'm like kind of like ashamed to work there because, mind you, I went to college. I had this mindset like, oh, I went to UConn. I just came from a children's hospital. I shouldn't be here. That was my mindset. God was changing my mindset and he was making me humble. He was going to make me humble by any means. And I end up meeting this man of God there, and he's talking. He comes up. At first, he doesn't talk to me. And then, mind you, there's so many men who try to talk to me, but like, obviously they're trying to like, get at me. But I don't play that. If you try to get at me, baby, you're going to expect to hear about God, because you're not about to just, you're not going to get nothing out of me but the word of Jesus. So, yeah, but this man, like, he came up and he was talking to me, but the way he came up to me, he would just ask me where I was from. And I could tell that he wasn't from here. So he was asking me where my parents are from. And I told him, and I was just like, where are you from? Because he has an accent. And he was like, Haiti. But I knew he spoke Spanish because I heard him speaking to other people in Spanish. I'm like, oh, how did you learn Spanish? He's like, oh, I went to a Spanish school. We start talking, whatever. And then eventually he starts talking to me about God. And the conversation that he had with me, it made me tear up. And I didn't even know him. So I knew he was from God. Eventually, more conversations, I realized I was working here because of God. And one of the things that he told me while I was working there was that don't be ashamed to work here. And he was telling me that everyone works here for a reason and everyone learns something here. And he was saying, I know a guy here who owns a building in Hartford, and he's like, there's rich people here, there's people, he's like, I have my CDL, I have this, I have businesses in Haiti, like not everyone's here is struggling. He's like, don't be fooled, and he's like, don't be ashamed to work here. And I just knew it was God talking to me, and every single time he was talking to me, I just realized that he was sent from God. But also working there, I met another person who God put me there to speak life into him. He told me that he talked to God, but his family was like Catholic, and that he wanted to get more, like he wanted to talk to God, but he just felt like kind of like he wasn't good enough. And I basically explained to him that he was, and that he should just talk to him. And he actually was like teaching me Spanish and stuff. But anyway, so he told me he wanted to go to school, but he didn't know if he was like ready, and he was like, maybe in a few years. I'm like, you're never gonna feel like you're ready, but like you need to do it now. And he's like, I don't know. And then eventually he told me that he was gonna quit and go to school, and I was like really, really happy. And I just knew that God was working in his life, but he needed me to kind of like kickstart him, if that makes sense. And I just feel like everything happens for a reason, and life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And I couldn't see it then, but I see it now. And though I'm obviously not where I want to, well, not obviously, but I'm not where I want to be in full capacity, but I'm in a better mental state. I have peace, and I realize that God is doing a thing, not only in my life, but in other people's life. And everything works together. Everything happens for a reason. And if you follow God's purpose, everything's going to work itself out. I believe that this podcast will eventually touch the hearts of many. And that's what I'm doing it for. I'm doing it because God put it on my heart. And I'm going to touch more on that in a little bit. But yeah, that's my little takeaway on quote of the day. To tie it in with the Bible verse, if you follow God, everything is going to work out for you. If you follow God, everything is going to work out in your favor. If you follow God, everything is going to work out in your favor. And I truly, truly believe that life is not happening to you, it's happening for you. And you're not going to see it in the moment, but you are going to look back and see why everything had to happen the way it had to happen. Okay, so next segment is another card game. It's not really a card game. It's called Talking Points, and it's the Christian version. But the description says 200 questions for faith-based conversations for any comfort or knowledge level. So it has 4 different colored cards, and the 4 cards mean something different. So we're going to start off with a red card, which I read a few, and these are just basically based off of the Bible. I read the first, I wanted to read the whole Bible by the end of the year. That doesn't seem like it's going to happen. But I'm currently in Numbers. So, but I haven't read Numbers in a few days. I've been like reading other parts of the Bible. So yeah, but I've read like Matthew, I've read Mark, I read Luke, I read Esther, I read Ruth, I read First Chronicles, I think I read Second Chronicles, I read Colossians. I've read a few books in the Bible, I'm not gonna lie. But I'm trying to read more of Old Testament. It's kind of hard, but the question says, this one, the red one, is Bible truths. And it says, do you have a soul as well as a body? Yes, I do. The answer is yes, I have a soul that can never die. Amen. Okay, the green card is world around us. The question reads, how does your faith influence what you watch on TV or look at on the internet? How does your faith influence what you watch on TV or look at on the internet? I'm not going to lie. When I see, okay, so I'll answer this in like different kinds. So when it comes to like fear mongering, or like, I know people don't like some prophetic messages, or like when people say stuff are going to happen, it may come off as fear mongering. When it comes to me, I have so much faith in God that like I kind of just skip over those messages. And I know some people are trying to warn people, but I just have so much faith in God that I just pray it away. I rebuke that it's going to happen, and I just pray for the best. I have so much faith in God that I just feel like He's going to protect me in every situation. So I don't focus so much on the negative. I kind of just try to focus on the now and what God is telling me to do. So when it comes to that, but like when it comes to like TV in general, God convicts. Like when it comes to me, I'm not gonna lie, I don't listen to humans. And I know that people feel like they can judge righteously, or they should judge righteously, and that's okay. But I don't listen to humans. So any single thing that I've ever changed in my life, it's because God told me to change it. So when it comes to like certain things that I watch on TV, lately I have not been able to watch full episodes of things in one sitting, or like really at all, because I just feel the conviction to turn it off. So like for instance, Baddies used to be my show, right? And I used to watch it every single Sunday at the exact time. And lately, like I have not been able to watch it in one sitting. Like I will start watching it, then I'll go on my phone, or I'll start watching it even if it's a good episode. I'll start watching it and just like feel the need to turn it off. And I just feel like God is changing my appetite. So I would say that as well. Yeah. The blue card is personal beliefs, and the card reads, if you believe there is a heaven, what do you imagine it to be like? I do think there's a heaven, and I feel like heaven is like gold filled in the streets. The buildings are gold. The people are happy. I don't think there's any like ill feeling. I don't feel like there's anything that is not of God there. I do hear that there's a war in heaven right now. I do believe God talks to people, though I'm still going to say I don't know how true that is, but I feel like in its entirety, I feel like heaven is peaceful. There's no like pain. I hope there's no pain. Yeah, I feel like it's just like beautiful. Like I feel like the people are their most beautiful selves. Like I just feel like everything there to describe it is just like so beautiful. That's what I feel like heaven is like the most beautiful thing you can think of. sunsets and just like beauty, like beauty. That's what I think. The last one is your faith journey. It's yellow and it says, how have you seen God answer prayer? I've seen God answer prayers in so many different ways, but I'll talk about a recent one, which was last night. So last night I prayed to God about something. And particularly, I prayed to God. Okay, so I mentioned that I worked at Amazon. However, my car stopped working and I felt like that was like, it stopped working on a Wednesday. I don't work on Wednesdays, but I work on Thursdays and Fridays. So, and I've been praying to God, telling him basically that I was like over the job. Like, yes, I felt like I needed the job because it was providing me money. But I realized that God did put me there for a reason, but I know that it was really never his will for me to work there. Like, yes, he allowed me to work there. It was his permissive will. You know what I'm saying? So he allowed it. But then when he's like, oh, you feel like you need it, it's time to go. So I feel like he was calling me out of there. And also I feel like he wants me to focus fully on this. So, and I also vlog, but I'll talk about that after. So, I feel like he was calling me out, and I feel like my car braking was like him testing me. Like, what are you going to do? Because I feel like he was calling me out. So I told him I didn't go to work on Thursday or Friday. I had work on Monday. I do work on Mondays, and my brother works on Mondays too. His friend works on Mondays too. So I could have went with my brother's friend. And also Amazon was working with me, and they're like, tell me why you're not coming. And they would have gave me my time back. But literally I told God Friday that I was giving up Amazon because I felt like that's what he was calling me to do. The messages I was seeing, what he was putting in my heart. And I realized that sometimes God does not talk to you because he's testing you. He's testing your faith. He trusts you. He trusts you to make a decision. So my decision on Friday was that, God, I'm going to give it up. Though I was scared because it was my way of making, or it is my only like income at the moment, I told God I was going to give it up. So yesterday though, I was just like, because I'm not fired yet, but I know it's coming. But so I basically told God, I'm like, I was praying to God and I'm like, God, like, is this what you want for me? Like, is this what you want me to do? Like, please, you haven't answered me. I told you I was going to give it up. I'm not going to go back, but I really, really want to know if that's what you want from me. But I didn't want to give it up because I knew that I was going to need pay stubs, or I felt like I was going to need pay stubs to move. And I'm like, I don't even know if you want me to move. Like, do you want me to go? Because I was also seeing messages of people moving on faith, but they, were just going, like they were just going, not knowing where they were going to go, and they were praying to God, and they just went on faith, and eventually God told them where they were going to move. Though God did tell me the exact apartment I was going to move, I didn't want to just go, though I would have been terrified to just go, but he's calling me to fix, like, I know that he allowed my car to crash, or not crash, but like crash down, like, you know, stop working for multiple reasons. One being because I feel like he was testing me about Amazon, but another being that I feel like he was allowing it to happen here while I was here before I went to where I was going, so that it was like I was able to fix everything now before I went. I'm like, God, like, are you doing this for me to like go now? Like, do you want me to go now? And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I've been asking you about provision, about when to apply, what's going to happen. And I was just like, I need an answer. Like, do you want me to go now? And then I opened up my Bible to a page, and it was Luke, I believe, Luke 24. And I read the, headers, and I'm like, this is not what you want me to read. So I closed it. I opened it on something else, and though I enjoyed the word, it didn't answer my question. So I'm like, God, like, I don't know. I opened the book back up, and it was back to Luke 24. So I'm just like reading Luke 24, and then I get to Luke 24:49, I believe. And it's the last thing on the page, and the header is Jesus appears to the disciples. And Luke 24:49 reads, I am going to send you what my Father has promised, but stay in the city until you have been clothed with power from on high. And I was just like, wow, like you're telling me to stay until you tell me it's time to go. And I just thought, like, I was just so happy to finally have an answer, because I'm just like, people are telling me like God speaks in so many different ways. He speaks in the word. I'm just like, how am I going to get an answer in the Bible about when to move? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, I'm like, I wouldn't know. Like, I was literally crying. I was like, I wouldn't know. Like, would you tell me audibly? Because he does speak to me audibly sometimes. I'm like, I wouldn't know like what to do. Like, but I opened up the Bible anyway, and I got my answer. And so then I looked up 2449 in Hebrew Strong's Concordance, and it says, to be wise, to act wisely, means to be wise or to act with wisdom. It conveys the idea of possessing and applying knowledge, understanding, and discernment in various situations. In the biblical context, wisdom is often associated with the fear of the Lord or adherence to his commandments. It is not merely intellectual, but deeply spiritual and moral, guiding individuals in righteous living. And I was just like, wow, like wisdom, like you're so like intentional. Like you knew I was gonna look up the numbers. You knew that I was gonna read this. It was literally the last thing on the page. Like, and I was just so happy. But yeah, I've seen God answer prayers by his own word. So I would suggest that if you do not read the Bible, that you do, because he'll talk to you in the Bible. He talks to me in so many different ways. I don't think I've ever experienced him talking to me. Well, I have experienced him talking to me in the Bible before. Like one time my Bible kept falling on the floor, and so I opened up the page and he spoke to me in the Bible that time too. But right after I prayed, he literally answered my question, and yeah, I felt heard. I felt seen. I felt appreciated. So yeah. Okay, so next segment is, what is this podcast? The podcast name is Jae2alk. The 2 stands for 2 J's, Jesus and Janae. That's why I chose the number 2 instead of a T. The podcast is about what I've experienced as Janae in my life and how Jesus has helped me through it, and how he is currently still helping me through things that I experience, or like just anything in everyday life. This podcast includes my testimony, and one thing I want to say is that this podcast is faith-based. It is relationship-based. It is not religious-based. So I speak about my faith because I've seen God work in my life in so many different ways. This podcast honestly is not for people who are overly religious. I don't consider myself religious. I consider myself Christian because I want to be more like Christ, but I do not consider myself religious. And I know some people may not understand that, but that's just what I just don't. My definition of Christianity is someone who aspires to be more like Christ, someone who picks up their cross every day to be more like Christ. Though I don't feel like I have the same ideology as religious Christians, if that makes sense. I feel like it would make sense if you felt the same way, but everyone's walk with Christ is different. So like I say, here we listen and we don't judge, but if you choose to judge, that's between you and God. What you think about me is none of my business. So, but what I would like to say is that this podcast is for people who are not religious. This podcast is for people who are religious. This podcast is for people who believe in God. This podcast is for people who don't believe in God. This podcast is for people who may not know where they stand with God or in their walk with God. This podcast is for everyone. The sinners and the overly righteous, it's for every single person, but mainly the sinners. I feel like my target audience is people who may not have faith, or people whose faith may be wavering, people who don't know where to go, people who feel like they're never going to get out of their current situations. I just hope that you see a message or see a topic that resonates with you, and you see that if I got out of it, if I got through it, you can get through it too. And hopefully you give God a chance. Hopefully you talk to him. Hopefully you build your relationship with him, because I genuinely believe that life would be so much better for you if God was in your life. And I'm not just saying that as like someone who's like, I would never push my beliefs on anyone else. But it's just like a loving, like, it really does come from love. Like, I've been so sad. I've been so depressed. I've been so down, and I can definitely see the difference of my life before Christ and after Christ. I've always believed in God, but I wasn't always trying to walk like God. I wasn't always trying to be more like God. I didn't have the same ideology. But I genuinely feel that life would be so much more peaceful, so much more better for you if you gave God a chance. And that's the main reason why I'm doing this podcast. So now I'm going to talk about why a podcast. So I talked about me working at the residential center. It was like a house. It was 2 residential houses. And for children with mental health issues, psychological problems, and behavioral issues. And that job was physically draining. You had to put the kids in holds a lot. I did not put kids in holds. I did like 2 or 3 holds my whole time working there, and I worked there almost a year, but there was holds every day. So people would literally do holds for me because I didn't want to. And it's not to say I couldn't, because the times that I put kids in holds, it was the biggest, strongest kids. But I was a little smaller back then. I did not work out, so I mean, it was a little bit of hardness, but I honestly did not want to do it. Like, I just didn't like, a lot of those kids were abused, and I know that it was needed because like they would try to run away or they would try to fight. But like, I just didn't like to re-traumatize them. And I feel like they liked me so much because I didn't put them in holds. And I know it may sound like they walked all over me, but none of the kids walked over me. They actually respected me more. But anyway, so one day I was praying to God, and I was crying out to him. And I was telling him how tired I was. I think this may have been the early 2023. And I was just crying out to him. At the time, I was working with the children, and I was just tired of the same things happening. Like, I felt like my life was on a repeat button. Like, I would go through the same struggles over and over again. And I was just really tired. So I was praying to God, and I was asking him for him to hear my heart. And so I literally poured out my entire heart to God. I told him about what I wanted in life. I told him that I felt purposeless. So I did feel purpose working at that job. I knew that that's not what God called me to do. So I cried out to him, and I asked him to show me what I was meant to do. Like, please reveal my purpose to me. I told him the cares of my heart. I told him what I wanted to do if he was to bless me with money. I told him what I wanted to do if my whole thing was that I thought I was going to be a clinical psychologist. So I was just asking him. I thought I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, but after working at that job, I realized that I did not want to be a clinical psychologist, because I realized that the more hands-on you are, the more the kids trust you. They don't really like, there was a kid that I was really close to, and he would literally tell me like everything about him. And when it came to therapy, he did not tell his therapist anything really. His clinician, he didn't tell his clinician anything, and he would like make me go to some of his clinician meetings for him to be able to talk. And so I realized like the more hands-on you are, the more you're with them, the more they trust you. And he didn't really trust him, and a lot of the kids were like that, honestly. And so I realized like if I was to be a clinical psychologist, I wouldn't be helping at the fullest extent, because they might feel safe with me, but like I barely know them. I'm with them like maybe once a month or once a week. I don't really know how therapy works or psychology works in that aspect, but I just realized that they wouldn't trust me to the full extent, and I feel like I wouldn't be getting my full purpose if I was to do that. So I was basically telling God I do not want to go back to school. School is hard enough for me to finish. Not gonna lie. I'm gonna talk about that in the next episode. I feel like that's gonna be the first like real episode, is death and grief. I'm gonna be talking about my mom passing away. She passed away my senior year of college. And I feel like it's important for me to say that I've never posted that on social media. So there's a lot of people who do not know that. The only people who know that are like the people who are closest to me, or the people who knew her. But yeah, I feel like I might talk about her in the podcast. So I feel like it's important for me to like not only talk about it, but like get it out the way first, just in case I ever mention something, then you guys know the background. But yeah, so college was hard enough for me to finish, I'm not gonna lie. Like, but anyway, so I was just telling God like I don't want to go back to school, and I was just asking him like, please help me, tell me what you want me to do, because if I'm not gonna go back to school, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Mind you, at this time I was getting closer to God. But I was still sinning. Like, I didn't see smoking as a sin. I didn't read the Bible at this time. So I didn't, like, I would hear people say like to stop smoking. But like I said, every single thing I've ever changed was because God told me to. Like, and when I say God told me to, he put it on my heart too. I would feel convicted doing certain things. That's how I knew that I was supposed to stop. I did not ever stop because someone told me to do it. It's not to say like you can't judge righteously, but I personally believe that God will convict people of their sins when it's their time. Because when people used to tell me to stop smoking, for instance, I'm going to do an episode on drinking and smoking, but let me just say one thing. Like, when people used to tell me to stop smoking, like, say I was smoking and I was watching a TikTok video and the person would be like, hey, you need to stop smoking. It's a sin, blah, 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 blah. I would be smoking and read the comments, and the comments would be like me watching this as I'm smoking a spliff, or smoking, I don't know what you could say in here. Me watching as I'm smoking whatever. And I would literally be cracking up laughing because like I did not see it as wrong. But I'm like, yeah, I do need to stop smoking. But I want to stop smoking for my own personal reasons, not because I felt like it was a sin. Drinking as well. I was drinking pretty frequently. Not like frequently, but like maybe like once a few times, maybe like 2 or 3 times a month. Like, I was drinking, you know, I didn't see it as a sin. I was going out, like, not really to clubs, but like to bars and stuff. Yeah, I just viewed life differently, I would say. And so yeah, everything I stopped doing was because God told me to. So like, I don't think that it's wrong for people to judge righteously, but I'm also a firm believer that God will convict people when it's time. So basically, I was crying out to God, and then that same day, maybe after I was done crying, because I was boohoo crying, snots, tears, like I was pouring out my heart, and I heard God say podcast. I heard God say podcast. I didn't hear it audibly, but I had a vision. Like, it's hard to explain, but like the word podcast, like I could see it. My eyes were open, but I could see podcast in my head. I don't know how to describe it, but podcast flew in my head. Like, I heard podcast, but I didn't hear it audibly, if that makes sense. God does talk to me audibly sometimes. I've only ever heard him audibly when I was fasting, I'm not gonna lie, but I saw podcasts. So I'm like, podcast. First of all, I wasn't really too sure what a podcast was. I did understand that like it involved a microphone, but like I'm just like, podcast, like what am I going to talk on a podcast? But I never envisioned for me to be talking about God. So I ended up, I heard podcast, and I eventually, maybe the next day or something, I was thinking like, what would my podcast even be named? And then the words "let's talk about it" came into my head. So fast forward, I was with my cousin. I went to my cousin's house, and we were smoking, and we were talking, and we're like, what are we supposed to be doing with our lives? Basically, like, we both had this like idea, like, baby, this is not the life for us. Like, we're supposed to be on vacation. Our nails are supposed to be done whenever we want. Like, our hair is supposed to be done whenever we want. Like, we're really like girly girls and we like to look pretty. And we're just like, this is not the life for us. Like, baby, I should be in Dubai right now. You know what I'm saying? So we're like, what can we do? And so then I told her, I was like, a podcast. She's like, that's cute. I'm like, yeah, that is cute. So she's like, what would the podcast even be named? And I'm like, I didn't say nothing for a little bit. Then I'm like, let's talk about it. And she's like, let's talk about it. That's cute. And I'm like, yeah, like the whole idea would be like, say we say something like, this is right here. So say we say, how have you seen God answer prayer? Obviously, that wouldn't be like the topic. It would be something more worldly. Okay, so at the time, I was way more worldly. So it would have been something more worldly, like say, have you ever gotten cheated on? Which is going to be a topic on this. But the conversation would have been different on there. But anyway, so say, have you ever got cheated on? Let's talk about it. Like, it would have been like that. Like, you know, I just thought the idea was like tea. So, yeah. So then eventually, the more I got closer to God, so when I was pouring out my heart to God, that's when I feel like that's when like there was a switch. And God was like, well, now that she knows that she's going to be doing the podcast, it's time for her to change. I feel like that was the moment that God was switching me. Mind you, it's not to say that I wasn't like, it's not to say that I wasn't getting closer to God, because even at the job, I was telling all the kids about God. Like, we would sit down, we would have conversations about God. Whenever they were like, whatever, I would pray with them. Like, I was still very much like, God was my Lord and Savior. I was just smoking. Really, I was just smoking. I was cursing Allah. I was drinking. Like, I was still doing things, but it's not to say I wasn't getting closer to God. But I feel like that was the moment where God's like, okay, well, you can't smoke, you can't be drinking, you're not going to be doing any of this for the podcast. But like I said, I had a whole different idea of what the podcast was going to be. So God started to change me, and he then started to convict me about smoking. I don't know. It was just like a random day. I'm like, I'm smoking and I felt wrong. Like, it felt wrong for me to smoke. And I'm just like, what's this feeling like? Wrong for me to smoke? Like, baby, I smoke. So he, that was the same year that, I started to work at the children's hospital, because I prayed and I asked him for a job where I didn't have to do anything but sit there and look pretty. That's my exact prayer. God, I want a job where I don't have to do anything but sit and look pretty. Please. The job wasn't bad, but it's just like, I would say that I literally get everything I pray for. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, because that job, when I tell you I was a sitter, my nails were done, my hair was done, baby, I couldn't do nothing but sit there. I had to watch the kids, like, just watch them. I couldn't be on my phone. I couldn't have headphones. Did I do that? Yes, but I wasn't supposed to. And whatever, but like, the job was literally to sit there, literally just watch the kids, do nothing but sit there and look pretty. I would do a few things, like, not to say I didn't do nothing, because sometimes you would have to put the kids in holds. Sometimes I had to play with the kids, depending on the kids. Sometimes I had to walk the kid around the hall. Sometimes I had to I had to chart on them every 15 minutes and stuff like that. So it's not to say I literally did nothing. I would have to change some of the kids depending on why they were there. Like, so it's not to say I didn't do literally nothing, but most of the time I didn't do nothing but sit there and look pretty. So, yeah, God gave me exactly what I asked for. But I was just like, yeah, no, this job not for me. But for that job, I had to not smoke. So that's when God started to prepare me to stop smoking so that I could get that job, because I did not want to have to get that job with fake pee. That's the first job that I actually stopped smoking for in time, and I used my pee and I got hired, and I was so happy. And it's not to say after that I did smoke, I'm not gonna lie, but that's when I was really like stopping. And And so that's like, as God was changing me, I'm like, okay, so me and my cousin are not aligned and I cannot do this podcast about whatever. But at the time I was still like hesitant, and I'm like, God, like, I don't want the podcast to be only about you, because I don't want to push my beliefs on other people. And I felt kind of bad saying that, but it was just like, I really, like, I don't want it to be all about you, God. Like what about me too? And I had that heart. But God, I was praying still, like, God, change me from the inside out. And he did, because baby, it is all about God. Like, that's something I really had to learn. Like, it is all about God. And I am not pushing my beliefs on anyone. I'm not forcing you to believe in God, but I am going to talk about God. And I now have the mission to talk about God. I am going to tell the world about Jesus, because Jesus has done more than enough for me. So I'm going to tell the world about him. I've seen him work in so many different ways in my life, and I'm going to speak about it, because if not God, then who? You know what I'm saying? Everything is about God. And I just pray that you guys watching, you guys will like give him a chance. Like, I don't just talk about him because I don't just do this because of other people. Like, I literally cried out to him, and he's literally been there for me ever since. And I know he's been there for me prior, because he saved my life so many different times as well. But like, when I truly like cried out to him, that's when I started to see his hand in my life. And favor is not fair, but he has given me so much favor. So yeah, I then switched it, and I'm like, yeah, I actually am going to talk about God. And so I have a journal entry where I'm writing in my journal, and I'm like, the podcast name is going to be Jae2alk. I wrote it with a 2 and not a T, and I was like, Jae2alk, because of Jesus and Janae. And I even wrote in there, like, I'm going to ask people and see what they think about it. And then I'm like, you know what? I don't care what people think about it. That's what I'm gonna do. And so I end up still asking my siblings, and they're like, Jae2alk. And I'm like, no, it's not Jae2alk, it's Jae2alk. And they're like, are you sure? I'm like, people do that. Like, they use 2 as a T. And they're like, says Jae2alk. And I'm just like, you know what? It's Jae2alk. So I decided to keep it. And from that moment on, I knew that it was going to be Jae2alk. And so, yeah, that's the infamous story about how God gave me Jae2alk. But I knew it was from God, because I used to be so shy, and I haven't really been put in the position to like be out of my comfort zone, but God has been pushing me to come out of my comfort zone. And the reason why I say life happens to you and happens for you and not to you is because he has been preparing me all along. He told me to start preparing in 2023. I started making videos on TikTok. I posted a few, and then I didn't post for a while. And then when I quit in August, he started to tell me to do quote of the day. I was building my discipline doing quote of the day, because eventually I would need to be disciplined on this. And since making videos on TikTok, at first I was so scared. Like, when I tell you, I was so shy. Like, I was the quiet kid. Like, if anyone's watching this who knows me or knew me, I have been so quiet my whole life. Like, since kindergarten, I barely said a word in school. Like, I was not the type of person to raise my hand. I hated presentations, but I was always in like honors and stuff. So like, I wasn't the type of person to like not present. I was gonna present if I had to, but like, I was just always been so nervous and so scared. Public speaking, just not my thing. Like, I had so much anxiety. Like, I've always been so nervous. I cast away anxiety though. I haven't had anxiety in so long, and I praise God for that. But yeah, like, I've always been so scared. And as you may be watching, like, oh, you look so comfortable recording, it's because I am. Like, I am so comfortable now, and I know that it was God preparing me, because life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And I know this whole time he was preparing me for this moment right here. But I'm really comfortable now, after going through like so much like turmoil. Like, God, like, I was just like, God, like, I can't do a podcast. Like, I could not even, like, when I was first propping my phone up, it felt so like, I felt like it felt like imposter syndrome. I'm like, this is just not me. Like, this does not feel like something I can do. Like, I cannot do this. Like, I do not want to talk in front of a camera. Like, this is just not me. And I did not One fear I had was people knowing who I was. Like, I know that so much people want fame, but this is how I knew that this was for me, because I did not want to do this. Like, I did not want anyone knowing who I was. I've always wanted to be rich, never wanted the fame. I do not want people to know who I am. So I'm just like, God, like, this is not for me. Like, I don't want people to know who I am. Like, please. And he's like, no, this is for you. And I'm just like, no, it's not. So that's how I knew like it was from God, because like I did not want anyone knowing who I was, like literally. But then I seen a video from Vic. If you guys don't know who he is, he's a barber. I seen a video from him, and basically he was telling a woman like, you have to do it, and you have to do it scared. Like, because she was saying she doesn't want people to know who she is, and I knew that video was speaking to me because I felt the same way at the time. And he's like, you have to do it scared. Like, people are going to talk about you regardless, whether you're doing good, whether you're doing bad, but they're going to talk. So you just have to do it. And if you have to do it scared, then do it scared. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And from that moment on, I practiced. And now I'm very comfortable. So that's how I knew that this podcast was given to me by God. And I know that it's going to, I feel like in my heart that it's going to do well, but I don't really care about the numbers for numbers wise, because I still don't want people to know who I am. But like, I know it's going to do well for, like, I want the world to know about God, like genuinely, like genuinely, like I really do love God. And mainly I want kids to watch this, younger people who haven't experienced this stuff yet, who can avoid it, people who may be going through it, young adults who may be going through it, old adults who may be going through it, whatever topic I posed about, to either prevent you from going through the same thing, or to save you if you're in the same situation, or just to give you a hope like things can get better. So I have a list of topics that I will be discussing in this podcast. So a few things I'll be discussing is death and grief. Like I said, I probably will do that in the next episode. Self-love, my moving testimony that has not happened yet, but I am trusting God for it to happen very soon. Abortion, domestic violence, drinking and smoking. However, those are more personable topics. So I'm going to name a few topics that aren't so personable that I'm still going to include. So for example, we have angel numbers or numbers in general, physical health, meeting new people, everyone has a gift or a purpose, is school for you, tattoos, music, cheating versus being cheated on, love versus lust, dreams, etc. So those are a few topics that I will be discussing. Now I'm going to speak about the structure of this podcast, which is subject to change. First, I'm going to start off with let's get deep. Then I'm going to move on to quote of the day. Then I'm going to do the Christian cards. And lastly, I'm going to do my testimony. And I wanted to end off with a card game. However, the card game that I got for this podcast was called Bad Choices, which was a bad choice to include because the cards are like insane. And like for me to use these, like I'm not reading these out loud. The card that I read on Amazon was like innocent. Like it was like funny, but like innocent. The cards that I'm reading, baby, I'm not saying I'm holier than thou, because baby, I'm not even gonna like come on this. I would never come on this podcast and lie, because first of all, God can see me. God knows my truth. And I tell God everything. I know some people are a little like filtered when they talk to God. I'm not. I literally tell God everything that's on my heart. So I'm not going to ever lie to you, because God can see me. So yeah. So I'm definitely not holier than thou, but baby, these cards, I'm not reading. This is not that kind of podcast. So like, okay, so these kinds of like these two that I have in my hand, not that crazy. These two that I have in my hand, absolutely insane. But this one says, would you rather win $50,000 than have your best friend win $500,000? No. But this one says, do you think you're the funniest person in the room? I'm the only person in the room, and yeah, I think I'm the funniest. But I'm still not going to read these. I'm still not going to use that, because like most of them are crazy. So if I was to pick out cards, there's no saying that the cards aren't going to be insane. So I'm just going to have to get a different card game to end off the podcast. But I want it to be like light. Like I don't want it to be like so serious. I want it to be lighthearted. Like would you rather win $50,000 and have your best friend win $500,000? Like, I want it to be a card like this. But no, I would not rather win $50,000. I've considered my best friend to be Jesus. So yeah, but like, say like whatever, I'm not selfish. So if I would want the best for my best friend, it's $50,000 for myself or $500,000 for her. Like, baby, I hope you win that $500,000. So yeah, I'm just gonna have to end with a different game because we're not doing that. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce Let's Talk About It. I know that you guys heard me talk about how I thought it was going to be my podcast name. However, I want to make it into a segment. So I want to do Let's Talk About It Tuesdays or Thursdays. I'm not sure yet, but basically the idea is that you guys would write in about whatever you wanted. It could be about relationship issues. It could be about a question about God. It could be something about school. It could be about literally friendships, whatever you desire. And basically, I would give my unsolicited, non-judgmental advice or opinion or input or whatever. And maybe even include something personable so that you guys don't like feel alone. But yeah, you would give me the name you want me to address you as, and I would basically read out whatever you say, and then I would respond to it. And I want to do this. The idea would be that I post an episode once a week, and then also on that same week, I would post Let's Talk About It Tuesday or Let's Talk About It Thursday. And yeah, I'm not a therapist, but I have been told basically all my life that I give really good advice, and I feel like it's because like I told you guys, I don't talk a lot, but I'm very observant. So, and I've been through a lot in my life, so I feel like through life experience I could offer advice if you guys wanted. And I know a lot of people don't have people to talk to. A lot of people don't want to talk to a therapist. A lot of people, some people don't say everything to God, even though, you know, I feel like it's a good idea. But some people want human advice, or some people want to hear things come out of a person's mouth. And I will not be judgmental, but I will always be honest. So if that's something you're interested in, please let me know. Okay, so also before I end this episode, I do want to make it known that I am vlogging now, and I have a vlogging channel. So the idea is that vlogging is like a hobby that God is using to get me out of my comfort zone. I've always wanted to vlog. So the idea would be like, so say I get a nice car, maybe Mercedes AMG GLE 63, something like that. But say I was to get that car, right, and I vlogged that, then the idea would be on the podcast I would share my testimony, my car testimony, which is a video. Or say I vlogged me moving into my new apartment. The idea would be on Jae2alk, I would talk about my apartment testimony, which is also a video that I have, a video idea that I have. So whatever I show as a blessing, vlogging would always be talked about on here, because I'm gonna give God the thanks for everything that happens in my life, which I already do. But the idea would be that it would be shown, whatever is shown on there would be talked about here. So yeah, I do vlog, and I'm going to put that in the description. And before I end this episode, I just want to say one thing. If you feel called to do something, first of all, I suggest that people have asked me, like, what do you think I should do? Should I do this or should I do that? My answer is always, it would be a disservice for me to tell you what you should do with your life, because just because you feel like you should do something, that doesn't mean that's what God wants you to do. So I always tell people to ask God to reveal what he wants you to do, and he will. But what I want to say is, some people feel like they're not qualified to do things. And I just want to say that God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And I told you that in 2023, I was called by God. He called me and told me that he wanted me to do this, and then he qualified me for it. Watching this and watching me some people may not feel like I'm qualified, and that's totally okay, because like I said, what you think about me is none of my business. But I know what God spoke to me, so that's what I focus on as my own person. But I want to say, like, if you don't feel qualified, I would suggest you bring that up to God, because it's not so much about what you think. If God is calling you to do something, then you need to be obedient and you need to do it. Me personally, when I was told I was going to do this, I also didn't want to do it. Like, even like recently, I didn't want to do it because I realized, like, I don't talk like every Christian. I don't look like every Christian. In that sense, like, for instance, I feel like a lot of Christians talk similar, and I don't really know how to describe it, but I talk in slang sometimes. I like my nails done. Not to say, like, everyone's the same, but like, I do like my nails done. I like my lashes done. They're not done right now. I like my hair being done. I like to look pretty, like, I'm a really, like, a girly girl. I don't talk like every single person. I haven't been through what other people go through. This podcast is not going to be like everyone's podcast. I don't think the same as every Christian. But what God told me was that's okay, because he's putting me in front of people who need to see me. And if my videos are not for you, then that is totally okay. I'm not here to force anyone to watch me. If I don't resonate with you, that's totally cool. You do not have to watch me, but I know that there's somebody out there who will resonate with me and what I'm talking about and who I am as a person. And God puts different people in front of different people. There's people in the hood, obviously, that God uses to speak to people in the hood. He's not going to use someone who's never been in the hood or can't relate to that to people who have been in the hood. Same for people who are in domestic violence situations. He's not going to put somebody to talk to people in domestic situations who've never been in domestic situations. People who are very religious, he's not going to put someone who's not very religious to talk to people who are very religious. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, he puts people where they need to be to reach whoever he needs to reach, and he'll do it in any different way. So don't think that because you're not like everyone else, or because you don't look like everyone else, or because you don't act like everyone else, talk like everyone else, haven't been through what someone has been through, that God is not going to use you, because God can use literally anybody. God can use a homeless person on the street to get his message across if he needs to do that. So I just want to let that be known. Like, if you don't feel qualified, don't devalue yourself because you don't feel qualified, because if God called you, it's for a reason, and he will use you how he chooses to use you, even if it's not spreading his word on social media. So that's what I want to be let known. I hope that you guys enjoyed the first episode, and I pray that you guys come back and you watch further episodes if the episode resonates with you, of course. And with that being said, I pray that everyone watching has a blessed rest of their day, and in Jesus' name I say amen.